Okay, guys, this is part 2 of chapter 1. So chapter 1, part 2, I'm going to just reread from starting on page 6. Too bad he doesn't have a nose because the food smells great, James said with a guffaw. You know, I'm 13, not 3, right? Morgan asked. I think you forgot about the, 1 in front of the 3 or something. James thought it might. Katie gave him a deliberate side eye. Cheer you up? Cheer me up, Morgan echoed. You've looked upset since moving here. Almost all the time, James said, glancing at Katie for approval. We just want you to feel at home here, comfortable. But this isn't my home, Morgan said. The last 7 places weren't my home either. Do you think, Morgan took a deep breath, a technique she'd learned to remain calm, a breakfast made into a face is going to change any of that? It's just what families do. Katie dabbed at her mouth now, as though she wanted to wipe away the words she just blurted out. She tried again. We're new to this, Morgan. This is our first family. She reached across the table and put her hand on James's. It was always just us before you came. I thought the breakfast was an excellent idea. James bit his lip. A pun? Seriously? Morgan, although her stomach had been roaring, pushed the plate away and crossed her arms. She took more deep breaths. If she blew up, they'd want her gone. Then it would be 8 homes, not 7. As ridiculous as James was, as annoyingly earnest as Katie was, they weren't awful. Not the kind of awful she'd been before, or she'd had before. Okay, her breakfast had been made into a face. It was better than finding a note on the kitchen table telling her to eat what's left and sitting alone with a bowl of dry cereal because there was only expired milk in the fridge. Cereal from the bottom of the box. Crumbs that only milk could save. Puns are what dads use, James said. It's like their language. I was trying. Morgan saw Katie gave James a short, subtle slap on the hand she'd been holding. You're not my dad, Morgan said. We're trying, Morgan. Katie's voice was quiet, as though this might temper Morgan's outburst. And you're not my mom, Morgan said. At least she hadn't raised her voice. That was a considerable feat, because her blood was at a boiling temperature. Stop trying so hard and just, lay off. And do what? What do you want us to do? James asked. I don't know. I'm the kid here. Morgan stood up. That's when she noticed that Eli's meal, too, was shaped into a face. They had breakfast-faced twins. Really? Well, he hasn't been. Why do you expect him to be just, happy? He got here last week. Let him be sad. He's going to be sad, okay? Morgan, for the first time, felt a connection to Eli. Come on, kid. We've got to get to school. Eli had been sitting there quietly, unmoving, probably in shock. His brown, almond-shaped eyes were staring at the plate as if he, too, had just noticed the food face. His lips were pursed as though he wasn't going to utter a word, even if he wanted to say something. And his feet seemed glued to the floor until, at Morgan's urging, he got up from the table and came to stand beside her. Morgan, Katie started. Sit down, James said. Finish your breakfast at least. I know you're hungry. Do you want me to do something with your stupid breakfast? With trembling fingers, Morgan took one of the slices of bacon, broke it in 2, and positioned a piece over each eye. She made the other bacon slice into a frown, then pushed the plate towards James. There, you've looked too happy lately. I'm just trying to help. That's not fair, James said. You know what's not fair? Morgan asked, but she stopped. Even though Katie and James seemed attentive, ready to hear what she had to say, unlike the plate of food, they did not look angry. They looked concerned. The only person that Morgan's plate looked like was, well, Morgan. She shook her head. Her planned speech about moving families, houses, about not even remembering her real home, if she wanted to remember it at all, was abandoned. She just shook her head. Never mind. She grabbed Eli's hand and brought him with her towards the front door. They got their shoes and backpacks on, and Eli took his drawing pad. Morgan worked very hard not to slam the door, and didn't. This was also a feat, but she took no pleasure in it. Okay, so we see Morgan and her feelings of anger and hurt, feelings of not having a home, of not belonging anywhere. We see that in the first chapter. We see Katie and James, her foster parents, trying to help her, but not really knowing what to do, not knowing how to make her feel welcome and at home in a place that isn't her home. So we see a lot going on here. We have a bit of an understanding of where Morgan has come from. Morgan has been in 7 different foster homes for a long, long time now. She talks about here her planned speech about moving families, houses, and not even remembering her real home, if she wanted to remember it at all. It's been a long time since Morgan has really been home. When you are not home, or feel like you don't have a sense of home, you feel lost. You feel like you don't know who you are. What do you stand for? Who are your people? Who are your family? Who are your cousins? Who are your friends? What do you guys do? What are your traditions? What are your cultures? When you've been taken away from that and then bounced from home to home to home, or I should say house to house to house, shelter to shelter to shelter, that sense of home never develops. And we can see here how Morgan is really, really struggling with that. And because of that sense of home being lost, she empathizes with Eli, the boy that's also living at her home now with Katie and James. And I think that will form a connection between Morgan and Eli if they can empathize with each other. That's just a prediction, an inference. I'm not sure if that will happen or not. Okay, that's the end of chapter 1. As a reminder, you need to complete your beginning, middle, and end sheet, this one. Okay, 4 sentences from what happened at the beginning, in the middle, 4 sentences for the middle, 4 sentences for the end, and a picture. Draw what you think is the most important part of the chapter. What part of the chapter, put it on the back, was the most important part to you? Draw me a picture of it. Okay? All right, guys. So far, the book is great, and we'll do chapter 2 next. Bye, guys. Take care.